And I am Jimena Garnica.
And we have a lot of things we want to cover tonight, so we're going to go fairly quickly. We have a number of our elected officials coming. We also have some longtime tenant advocates in the room, Chuck Delaney and Michael Mckee. Chuck from Lower Manhattan Loft Tenants, who was responsible for the original loft law in 1982. And is going to teach you a few things of what it means to get a law passed in Albany.
Okay, so thanks everybody for being here first. Eve doesn't like I say thank you because thank you means like you're doing something for us, but I think we have to thank each other for being here because we're taking time that we could be doing something else, and we are making our presence. And I want to say a lot of things today, and we will get there, but one of the things is that I became a citizen last year, and I've been going to Albany the last month, and I learned a lot, but one of the things I learned, and I hope I'm right, is that we can change things, but we have to show up. And we have to do actions, not just the like on Facebook. And today is great, but we're going to need more than being here today. So this is a great start that you are here. So let's make sure we have our phones out. Join our Facebook thing, which is New York Loft Tenants. Tag Improve the Loft Law. Tag the rally so that we can spread the word more. And welcome. Thank you for being here, Mr. Lentil. Okay, continue.
Okay. I just wanted to take a moment and thank the Franciscan Friars for donating the church today. Thank you. And then you want to do the tradition? Did you want to?
Yeah, I do. I want to say a few other things. Huge thanks to the Franciscan Friars. Oh, you did? I didn't catch that. Okay. Father Repeal's right there. Father Nick is not with us tonight because he's actually he's being ordained in Syracuse. I also want to let everyone know that our Assemblyman Joe Lentil just came. And Joe has been hugely supportive to artists and live workspaces and the loft law for a very long time. Every time we go see him and say, Joe, we need to improve the loft law, he's like, what are you seeing me for? Go see your enemies. But he's really our friend, and he's a great friend, and he's going to say a few words to us. One more thing I want to say before Joe comes up. We really want everyone in the room to become a member of New York City Loft Tenants, and we're asking everyone to donate. Donate whatever you can. $20 would be great, but whatever you can manage. The money's spent sending people to Albany to lobby, and that's really important, and it does cost something. There's a point perhaps in June where we're going to ask, say, 40 or 50 people to go up to Albany. That might mean renting a bus. That's what we spend the money on. So we need everybody to chip in. So I think without further ado, Joe, do you want to say a few words?
I do. This is like deja vu all over again. Didn't we do this once before, Eve? Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out, and thank you, Father Nick. Oh, he's not here. Father Repeal.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us use your church and to stay out of the rain. I do want to say that this should be a very easy one. But you know, in Albany, it seems that everything is tough, and we got to fight for every inch of our rights. And I guess it's not so different in Washington these days either. But the point is that the loft law needs to be amended. Every law that's passed isn't perfect, and we have to improve upon it. And this law is no exception. And it is ridiculous that this law has an expiration date, that we have to go to Albany to fight up until June 15th in order to continue to allow people to register for the law. That's a disgrace. And we got to get that done, and we're going to get it done as soon as we go back to Albany, right? Now, if you don't already know it, loft dwellers are very special to me. I like to call you loft dwellers because you are very cool, first of all. And the second reason is, who wouldn't want to have live workspace? You know? You don't have to worry about taking the train to work. You don't have to worry about costing the city money by public transportation or costing yourself money for public transportation. You don't have to worry about walking to work. So I'm very excited about participating in this fight, and I want to pay a special thanks to Maritza Davila. I know Rachel is here from her office. Rachel? Rachel! So, Maritza's the sponsor of the bill. I'm only a co-sponsor, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm going to fight just as hard as I ever did in order to get this law passed. And most of the lofts are now in her district. That's why she's the sponsor, right? Doesn't matter. But, and I want to thank Marty Golden, who's not here tonight, but he's one of the good guy Republicans who agrees to go along with the loft law. So let's give him a round of applause, too. And so, you know, I don't really deal in housing. I only deal with it when I know it's a necessity for my constituents to have it, because my job in Albany, or my specific job, is to deal with the criminal justice system. I'm the chairman of the Codes Committee, and I just wanted to report to you anyway, even though it's not what we're here to talk about tonight, that it may have gone unnoticed, but we passed one of the most monumental pieces of legislation this year ever, because we raised the age, of criminal responsibility. And that was my bill that we passed. And I've been fighting for that bill for 12 years, and we finally got it passed. And we're going to get this bill passed in Albany, too. And we're not going to wait 12 years. We're only going to wait 2 weeks at the most. So, the last thing I want to say is, you have fabulous leadership. Now, you know, this is just amazing, because Eve was there at the very beginning, Eve Sussman. Now, she's got to get a real round of applause. Where's Simon? Is Simon here? And do you remember, I saw Ellen Harvey for the first time in 10 years. Where's Ellen? Now, I know that we have newcomers to the fight, and I want to congratulate everyone who's participating, and we really need you guys in Albany. We need you guys to come because we have a real fight in the Senate, in case you didn't know it, like we always do with tenants legislation. And I know that this isn't going to be easy, but if you come up and there's a show of force, it's going to make our jobs a little bit easier to get the bill passed. The first time we passed this loft legislation, it was because you guys came up and made a fuss about it. And fortunately, we had a Democratic Senate for the first time in a long time as well. And that made a big difference too, of course. But we will be able to do this, and we will get it done. You know, tenants are at a big disadvantage in Albany. We're going to fight so that that doesn't happen anymore. I hope that the end of the Trump era will show that we need more Democrats, more progressives in Albany, so that we can get the kind of legislation that I think, and I know you think, we deserve. And I want to say, before I'm finished, I made a big mistake by not introducing him earlier because somebody with a sign was blocking him. Mckee, one of the greatest tenant leaders in the state of New York. Would you stand up and take a bow, please? Michael, you know we're going to need your help on this one, okay? And I know we have it because you've been there forever with us in Albany in the fight for tenants' rights. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me. And now I'm very pleased. You want me to introduce the next speaker? Sure. The next speaker is going to be the guy who worked with Vito Lopez to draft the original Loft Law, Council Member Steve Levin.
Let's hear it for Joe Lental. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Levin. I'm City Council member. I represent this neighborhood, Williamsburg, Greenpoint. I represent South Williamsburg. I represent Dumbo. I represent loft communities with Joe Lental. Joe. I'm also a loft tenant. In my building, 125 Green Street, we're doing Loft Law. Yeah. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. And listen, you guys are doing exactly the right thing. Loft tenants in New York City for the last 50 years have been getting the laws changed, the laws amended, people's housing covered under law, legalized, totally by force of will and organization. That's what's made it happen from 1969 to 1982 to 2010 to 2013. Over and over again, it's been the organization, it's been the ingenuity, it's been the determination and passion. You know, we talk a lot about affordable housing in New York City. The bedrock of affordable housing in New York City is rent-stabilized housing. That's the bedrock. The bedrock, when people come to Joe's office or to my office seeking assistance, the first on if they're being evicted or they're being harassed by their landlord, the first thing I ask them, are you a rent stabilized tenant? Are you a rent stabilized tenant? Because that's what gives people rights of tenancy. That's the most important thing. And the reality is that, you know, loft tenants have fought for that right, and they've gotten that right, and they need to stand up for that right. And absolutely. And the reality is, and you all know this firsthand, the loft law is an imperfect law. A lot of our laws are imperfect laws. But that's what we do when we have imperfect laws, is we work to make them better. We can amend the laws through the legislature, through the city council if it's a city issue, or through the state legislature when it's a state issue. And we're very fortunate here in our neighborhood in Brooklyn that we have Joe Lenthal in the Assembly working for us, and that we have our colleagues in the State Senate, Daniel Squadron and Martin Delan, who are working for us, Maritza Davila in the State Assembly working for us. We have legitimate advocates that are actually, I think there's even a Republican state senator who's doing some lifting, hopefully, Marty Golden. The reality is that you've got to kind of go and do all that you need to do, whether it's, it's lobbying, making phone calls, sending postcards, sending emails, bugging people with, calling them up on the phone, talking to their staff, making sure that they understand that these are life and death issues. I mean, these are the issues of staying in your home or not staying in your home. This is the issue of making it in New York City or not making it in New York City. It is increasingly tough out there. I just got off the phone with a constituent, a friend of mine, who's facing eviction in the apartment that he's been in for 18 years. And looking for a new apartment is so daunting. To find something that is affordable in this day and age is becoming increasingly more and more difficult for people that are in the arts, for people that don't necessarily have traditional forms of income. I mean, it is harder and harder to do. So the reality is that if you have an affordable apartment, a place that you call home, for many of you, a loft that you have built out yourself with your own sweat equity, your own blood, sweat, and tears, you have got to hold on to that with everything you've got, And when we got to change the law, we'll change the law. We'll continue to advocate. So I want to thank the New York City loft tenants. All of you. I want to thank Eve for really doing a lot of the organization. I want to thank all of you for doing all of you. Jimena, thank you, Jimena. One other thing. 4 or 5 years ago, we did a lot of engagement and advocacy to the Loft Board and to the Department of Buildings on issues around incompatible use, on other major issues. We need to make sure that we are putting that pressure on again. And seeing everybody out at the Loft Board over the last couple of meetings has been so inspiring. Jimena has done an amazing job organizing people and making sure that people understand the ramifications of the issue that she's facing. But I just got to tell you, keep that advocacy going. Advocate to the Loft Board. Make sure that they know that we're watching them, and that on issues around coverage, on issues around subtenants being recognized, all those issues, we need to make sure that they are paying attention and that they know that we're watching. So thank you all so much. Keep up the fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Joe. So we need to change the law, we need to amend the law, and I just want to make sure we are all in the same page right now. So what we need to change, we have a series of asks that are being blocked by our window, but the first ask is we want to repeal the 2010 window and basement exclusions. This means that even if you don't have a window, but you have the potential to have that, or if you have a basement unit, that you can still be covered, because that was the point of the initial law, that you legalize the spaces that need to be brought up to code. So that's our first ask. The second ask is to repeal the 2010 use group exclusions, which means, you know, there are buildings where you have a carpenter shop downstairs and suddenly the third floor cannot be covered. This is unfair. So we need to remove that too. We need to repeal those use group exclusions. Repeal the June 15 application deadline. The Loft Law is supposed to put an end to all these unsafe situations of live and work spaces. Unless these spaces get brought up to code, the problem still exists. So having a deadline doesn't make sense unless we fix the problem. So we have to fix the problem first. Then, or they have to make the landlords accountable for the problem, which they're not doing right now. Then the next one is to make the rent milestones and unit size permanent. In 2015, some of my fellow advocates right now fought to get some amendments passed where the rent increases were lower than where they were supposed to be, and also the unit size became smaller, 400 square feet instead of 500 square feet. We want that to become permanent. This is supposed to sunset in 2019, but we want to keep your rents lower. So this is a really important point as well. And the last one is to update the eligibility period to 2015, 2017. A lot of people we know moved to Brooklyn recently. Yeah. So, when you make your phone calls, when you write a postcard, when you send a letter, don't ask for one thing, eh? We want more than one. And it's important that we ask, because otherwise we're not gonna get anything, all right? Okay, so now I would like to introduce a person that I just recently met. But I always think, these nights when I think about the Loft Law, I'm like, oh my God, there's people that need like some sort of statue built, because why are they doing this? They really care about humanity. There is no other reason, because they are already covered. They have no, what is it? No dog in the fight? I learned that yesterday. But they keep fighting for us. And I seen him in the Loft Board meetings, and he's like he just go for it, and he doesn't back up, and he's really fighting for each of you, even if you don't know him and he doesn't know you. And I'm just very thankful and very glad that he's here, and he's gonna talk a little bit of how this all started back in 1982. Okay, Mr. Chuck Delaney, thank you very much.
To the 1920s, when New York State passed a very progressive piece of legislation called the Multiple Dwelling Law, right? And that's where the Loft Law resides. It's Article 7C of the Multiple Dwelling Law. And one of the reasons that that law was enacted was to prevent slumlords from building residential buildings that did not have a residential certificate of occupancy. And to prevent that, and write these two numbers down, I want you to remember these numbers, write them on your arm. Section 301 and 302 of the Multiple Dwelling Law. And what those said are, if you open an apartment building, a multiple dwelling, with 3 or more units, you can't evict the tenants, and they don't have to pay rent, right? That was designed to be something so threatening that no one would ever do it. So now, flash forward about 50 years to the late 60s, the early 1970s, and because of deindustrialization, a lot of loft space became available. And the space that became available wasn't the really fancy buildings with elevators, it was the 25 and 32 footers, right? And they were vacant, And who came along? Artists and other fellow travelers in neighborhoods that were still then pretty funky, and said, hey, you know, I'd like to rent this place and I'd like to live there and work there, and I'll fix it up for you. And that's what we did. And the landlords frequently said, number one, behind our faces, like, this is great. And number two, to us, they said, oh, okay, I'll give you a 10-year lease or 5-year lease. And those leases started to go out in the 60s. And in the 70s, the leases started to come due. And the landlord came in and knocked on the door, looked around and said, wow, what you've done here is really fabulous. You pay me $400 a month rent. This is a gold mine. The only problem is you're the piece of dirt I got to get out of it. And by the time the Loft Law passed in 1982, there were literally over 100 buildings on rent strike. There was real skin in the game. There were buildings that hadn't had heat for a couple, 3 years. There were buildings where the landlords had cut off the water, right? That was the kind of context that we dealt with. And in 1982, we ended up with a decent loft law. The loft law I'm covered under is better than the 2010 loft law. So now, with that little bit of history, I'd like to get a little sense of who you are. So do me a favor, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and if they pertain to you, just raise your hand, okay? So number one, raise your hand if you're in the room. This is important for two reasons. It gives you a sense of how many people really don't want to commit, because we're going to need you to commit. So, question number two, raise your hand if you live in a loft. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you are covered in a building that's registered as an interim multiple dwelling. Okay, now we're down to about half. Raise your hand if you've got a case pending before the loft board. I'm going to turn my back so I should know. Okay? So it's about a quarter. Raise your hand if you're not covered because you moved in after 2008, 2009. Okay, we got some. So this is what we're going to work with. And, you know, Joe has alluded to the fact that we've been successful, but I want to tell you the 2 or 3 secrets as to why we're going to get at least some, if not a lot, of what we're seeking this year. You want to know? Yeah. Okay. All right. The first reason is because you're here tonight and you're prepared to take the next step. And over the next 2 or 3 weeks, some of you are going to find yourselves doing things you never imagined you would do. And the reason that that's exciting is because of who you are and who we are. That's because we're artists and part of the creative community. There's a reason that armies have marching bands and drums. As Michael Mckee said to me a few minutes ago, we need these people with the signs and the costumes standing in front of the New York State Senate as frequently as they can get up there over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Sure. Yeah? That's a commitment. Now, raise your hand if you've ever been to Albany to lobby. Oh, look at all the room for growth we have in this room. This is fantastic. Okay, now, the last reason that we're gonna succeed is because, and with all due respect, Joe, I have to just, it's all right. You scare elected officials. Officials. Because if I'm the head of the steam fitters union and I take 500 steam fitters to Albany, they'll march around, they'll do exactly what I tell them to say, and at the end of the day, the guys in the back room know the only person they got to cut a deal with is me. Yes! I'm telling you from experience I'm telling you from experience, you take a busload or two of loft tenants to Albany, and boom, they go off in every direction. They start grabbing legislators. They start asking questions. It's total chaos. They don't see this. They do not see this kind of behavior. And because you're artists, you actually remind them of their younger brother, who was the creative one in the family, right? This is all true. Because it's very, elected officials, they have to speak a certain way and deal with different kinds of issues. We're seeing a lot of this right now. But you really are in the position to speak truth to the people in power. The creativity that, just look at what this needs to, a lot of this signage needs to go up to Albany. So that's what's important. The people who've been going up are doing a fabulous job, and this is not an abstract exercise. Yeah, the deadline to file an application might be closed for a while if we don't succeed in keeping it open. But there are also people in this room who are this close, and I mean this close, to losing their loft. And we can't afford to let that happen. So there's a real battle going on. And we're going to need all of you to do what you can and get your neighbors to get involved. We've done this, we're going to do it again. This is not our first rodeo. But I want to tell you about my first rodeo. It won't take very long. In 1979, we went to Albany, like half a dozen of us. Senator Manfred Orenstein, who's really the guy who was responsible for getting the Loft Law passed, sent an aide with us. We took the train up. We got to Albany. They gave us a little, they said, oh, go around and talk to people. There was a very important senator we had to talk to named John Markey, who ultimately helped us get the Loft Law passed. And we went into John Markey's office, and some snot-nosed aide said, what do you want to do? And we kind of didn't know what we were talking about. And we said, well, what we want to do is get protection for tenants in these buildings that don't have residential certificate of occupancy. And this aide said, we can't do anything without a message of necessity because of home rule from the city of New York. So go back to New York and get a message of necessity. So we all like, well, okay, shit. Sorry, Bob. Here we are in Albany, and we really need to be back in New York to get a message of necessity. So I'm walking down the hall, and I run into a guy, and that I knew not so well then, and he said, what's going on? And I said, well, we just found out we have to go back to New York and get a message of necessity because of home rule to effectuate some changes up here in Albany. And this gentleman said, you go right back and you go see the same snot-nosed guy and tell him that's bullshit. That the New York State Legislature routinely amends the New York City Administrative Code without a message of necessity. I didn't even know what that meant, right? So I rehearsed it, we walked around through the LOB, we got to the guy, I said that, and they said, okay, come on in, let's talk, right? So it was like a summer camp trick, and we would have fallen for it. Except the guy who told me that was Mr. Michael Mckee.
I can't do what Chuck does.
His memory's starting to fail.
Yeah, right.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
All right, I don't even know how this works. I'll try to speak so you can hear
Let me
me.
figure it out.
First of all, it was a home rule message, not a message of necessity. It was bullshit. And Chuck and I are just arguing. My memory is we met on the train going back to New York. He says we met in the hallway. Okay, whatever. Let me just tell you a couple things about Tenants Pact before I talk about Albany, or Planet Albany as we refer to it. Tenants Pact is 20 years old. We do election work. Chuck is on the Tenants Pact board and has been since the beginning. We help elect pro-tenant candidates to elected office, especially in Albany and especially in the state senate. And for a number of years, our focus has been on trying to turn the state senate blue and help the Democrats become the majority. We've also gotten rid We've also gotten rid of some really crappy Democrats who were pro-landlord, and some of them are actually in prison now, which is where they belong. We approached last November's election in the thought that if we didn't turn the state senate last year, we wouldn't be able to do it in 2018. And the reason for that is very simple. 2016 was a presidential year. 2018 is not. The top of the ticket is going to be Andrew Cuomo running for a third term. He will do everything he can to depress turnout. But the bottom line is that in a non-presidential year, about 1 million voters stay home who otherwise show up in a presidential year, and most of them are Democrats. But we were wrong. And why were we wrong? Because we are now seeing the effects of the Trump regime in upstate New York and the suburbs, where people who actually voted for him, he who shall be nameless, are not happy with what's going on. So we think we actually might have a chance of turning the state senate next year, in 2018, which normally we would not. All of those races, by the way, will be outside of the city. They will not be in the city. There's only 2 Republican senators in the city, and I don't believe either one of them can be taken down, at least not now. Okay, let me talk about Albany, or as I refer to it, Planet Albany. People don't understand much about the legislative process, and the first thing you need to understand, it is not a neat, tidy process. It is messy, it is chaotic, it is confusing. 50%, I would say probably 60% of what you need to do in the next 4 weeks, because that's how much longer this session will be going on, is to be there. To be in Albany, in numbers, with some of these visuals. I mean, one of the reasons the loft tenants have won is because of their creativity. Just to give you a couple of examples, some years after the loft law was enacted in 1982, the loft board passed a heating regulation that required what, 50 degrees, 60 degrees? And no heat on weekends. So can you imagine living in an apartment where they don't have to heat your apartment up more than 50 degrees in the wintertime? So the loft tenants showed up at the loft board with a whole bunch of potatoes and put them on the shelf, because that was, the message was, this is adequate for potatoes to stay warm enough, but not for people. So that's potato heat. And they've done a number of very creative things like that. So a lot of what you need to do, most of what you need to do, is to be in Albany in the next 4 weeks. There are roughly, I'm just trying to visualize here, there are roughly maybe 20 legislative session days left, maybe 15, I don't know.
I would say 11.
People can't hear me?
11.
It's a little better.
Hello? Can I turn it off?
Okay, I can usually make myself heard, but I guess it's different.
Okay, however many sessions days there are left, You need to be there every single one of those days. A session day is when the Senate and the Assembly are in session, meaning they're in Albany, or one of the houses is in session. You need to be there every single one of those days. A small group with great visuals, with a good leaflet, and part of what you just need to do is to be seen. It's unrealistic to expect legislators to deliver anything controversial without grassroots pressure, no matter how hard they try. So if there is not that kind of grassroots pressure coming from the grassroots, the likelihood of getting this done diminishes greatly. So don't look to your elected officials to deliver this for you. No matter how hard they try, if you're not pushing, it's not going to happen. So I think, you need to volunteer tonight. You need to sign up to make a trip to Albany. It's 3 hours up the thruway. It's actually a very nice little town. It's the legislature that sucks. You're going to need to raise money. So you should leave here tonight with making a donation or making a pledge, and you're going to need a lot of effort. Just think about it this way: it'll all be over in a month. You'll win, you'll lose, you'll win a part victory, you'll win a full victory. You won't get the bill. There's no guarantees ever of any of this stuff happening. But whatever happens, it's going to be finished in a month. Because if the legislature is not in session, there's nothing that's going to happen in terms of enacting of legislation. So that's my basic message to you. This can be done. I believe you can do it. Chuck and I will certainly help you. We'll help you strategize, figure all of this stuff out. Having these fabulous things outside the Assembly chamber and outside the Senate chamber. They're on the same floor, so you can go back and forth. Having people outside the glass doors as legislators and lobbyists and legislative staff come in and out, passing out a flyer. I mean, a lot of it is just reminding people of this issue. Legislators have to deal with dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of issues. This is only one issue that any legislator has to understand and address. Your job is to make them feel that this issue is important, that it rises to the top of the list, especially at the end of session, which gets really chaotic. The last few days are insane. You're going to need a core group, a group who are going to be willing to stay up there the last week. Take lots of socks and underwear, because you'll go down State Street to try to buy a shirt or something, and you'll find that they're sold out. This happens to everyone at the end of session. Don't believe that just because the official last day is supposed to be the 21st, I believe. It could be the 22nd, it could be the 23rd, it could be that weekend. But that's the 21st is sort of like it's like a marker. But often the session goes a few days longer, and they will be in session at that point for like 15, 16, 17 hours straight. And you need to be there. I think the largest part of what you need to do is to be in Albany when this is happening, because I don't think you're going to be able to do that if you're not in Albany. You can write letters, you can send emails, you can do all of those things. It does not have the same effect as your physical presence. So that's basically my message, and good luck. Don't let the bastards get you down.
So, thank you so much, Mike. And so when he said to sign up for going to Albany, there is not really a sign-up table or a person who take care of these. That means you bring 5, 6 friends, you rent the Enterprise car, and you try to go there. That's the thing. Like, we need to be like empowering ourselves. there is the info session that had happened, the last two. I don't know if anybody in the room came. We had 2 info sessions. There will be another one on June 3rd. Those happened really because I just look around and I thought, oh, people need to know these things. Lawyers are expensive. My lawyer is like really expensive. He's here, thank you, but he's expensive one. But then I say, okay, thank you, David, for volunteering for the info sessions. Okay, so I just want to say that you just have to, like the info session was something like, okay, I'm gonna make it happen. You can make happen the trip to Albany. You can make happen those things. And now we're gonna introduce our next speaker.
Rachel Fuentes is here for Assemblywoman Davila, who's been hugely supportive of us. And I know Rachel has very little time, and she's worked on this issue forever, so I'm going to let her speak, please.
Hi, everyone. I am Rachel Fuentes. I'm Chief of Staff to Assemblywoman Davila. She's in the 53rd Assembly District, filling the very big shoes of Assemblyman Vito Lopez, who, as we know, is one of the reasons we're all here tonight, who passed the Loft Law in 2010 that made this possible. The Assemblywoman has been living practically with your amazing leadership, Simon, with Eve, with Aaron, with, oh God, I'm gonna forget everybody. But I just want you to know how much work they're doing to make sure that she's aware of your concerns and to make sure that she's doing everything that she can in Albany to fight this fight for you. I do have just a little bit of news that I wanted to share about the bill, which is what we're all talking about. We are not having the bill drafted by the Assembly person. It is being drafted by the Housing Committee and by Programming Council of the Housing Committee. I spoke to them today. We will have a bill draft next week. It will be on the Housing Committee agenda, the very next Housing Committee agenda, which I assume will be when we return to Albany the following week. In that time, your Assembly members, Joseph Lenthal, us, Deborah Glick, are going to have a chance to look at that bill and with all of you say whether what is in that bill is what we want to see in that bill. And if it isn't, then we're going to have a really big fight to make sure that it is. It's going to start down here in Brooklyn, and it's going to go all the way up to Albany, and you do need to be there every step of the way from now till June 23rd? Yeah, June 23rd, the end of session. So I just want you to know how important that is. Yeah, we have 11 session days. So you need to be there all of those session days. And I just want to say one other thing. The Loft Law has been not just a fight for a ton of wonderful creative people, but it's been a fight for a bunch of individuals. And we've seen many laws passed about individual cases, and you're going to hear about some a little bit later. In 2010, the Loft Law was expanded. In 2011, we had to do a cleanup and essential services bill for Ted Parton and 360 Jefferson Street. 450 Kent was fighting for the original bill. The provisions that changed the deadline in 2015 were pretty much for 79 Lorimer. And now we're about to face trying to get this window exclusion changed for 58 Grand Street. We've been winning, and we need to continue to win, and we can only do that together. The Assemblywoman is here on your side. She cannot be here tonight only because she has a very severe family emergency, but this is exactly the message she wanted me to send. Thank you for all of your hard work and all of your support, and know that she's there for you in Albany.
Thank you, Rachel.
Let's hear it for Maritza Davila's office and Rachel Fuentes.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, Rachel Fuentes, and a lot of people here probably are in Bushwick, and Maritza Davila. You should, if you don't know that this is your lady, you should really know Maritza. She's amazing. I met her recently, and she said, "You haven't seen the Maritza show," and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's the woman I want to fight with." So thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you so much to Maritza Davila.
Maritza Davila, everybody, let's hear it. Loud, Maritza Davila.
So,
I would like now to introduce Michael Kozak, our greatest advocate for loft law advocacy.
yes. Before Michael takes the mic, I say we like to surround ourselves with real good politicians and real good lawyers, and that's really hard. So here's one of the good ones.
So I just want to, first of all, thank New York City Loft Tenants for putting this together. You guys have done a tremendous job. I'm out there, on the front lines, fighting in court for loft tenants. I'm not the only one. David Frazier's here. We are dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis. And some of you know this about me, and some of you don't. But I am myself a child of the loft law. I grew up in New York City in 3 different lofts. My parents were artists. They fought for their loft spaces for a couple of decades. In fact, the lawyers who were trying to evict them are lawyers that I now go up against on a daily basis. And so I've got obviously a little extra motivation going up against them. And for me, the preservation of loft space in New York City is so important, just because it was real for me. The communities that my parents were a part of, the community that I was a part of, really formed an integral part of the areas in which I grew up, and preserving those neighborhoods is so important. And I think that it's so important for you all to be a part of strengthening the loft law and maintaining those communities, because the reality is that they are dying. In Manhattan, the old school loft communities, they've really gone away. They're not really what they used to be, but there's a vibrant loft community here in Brooklyn, and we can make it more vibrant if we continue to strengthen the loft law. So I think it's important for all of you to be a major part of that, and we can continue to do that. So, I just want to talk about a couple of the parts of the loft law that, we're seeking to address in these asks here, and these are things that have to go. They just have to go from the law. The original loft law was enacted in 1982. All you had to prove was that your building didn't have a certificate of occupancy, that was formerly used for manufacturing or commercial purposes, and that you had 3 units that were used residentially. That was it. If you prove that, then you get coverage. In 2010, by virtue of various real estate interests, there were pieces put into the loft law that were intended to basically create loopholes, right, to prevent people from getting coverage. And those things we're talking about, the basement issues, we're talking about the window issues, the incompatible use issues. When you talk about the windows, for example, it never made any sense to put in the exclusions, and frankly, it's contrary to the loft law itself, right? The loft law was designed to take illegal spaces and find a way to bring them into code compliance, to make these into legal spaces. So why put in carve-outs to say, all right, we're going to put these things in there and say, all right, these spaces can't be covered under loft law because there's some technical issue with respect to the space, and that's going to limit the ability to cover it. Well, the way the original loft law worked was, if you could prove that the space was covered, great, you get covered for the unit, and if there was an issue with respect to legalization, then you deal with that later on. And you try to find a way to get the space legalized. If you have a window that's on a lot line, maybe you try to get an easement onto the next property. Maybe you put in a window, right? If you had a manufacturing use in the building, maybe you find a way for that manufacturing use to be relocated. Or if the manufacturing use was going to leave on its own, well, then that doesn't prevent having it in the same building with residential use. So what happened in 2010 is they put in all these pieces, right? Say now we're gonna find a way to exclude these units and these buildings from coverage by virtue of these technicalities. So right, you have a window. If you have a window that is on a lot line, for example, right? That potentially that unit couldn't be subject to coverage. But here's the thing about it, right? The landlords of these buildings, they only want to exclude the unit from coverage, right? They're going to say, all right, here's a unit. It doesn't have a legal window, so it can't be covered under loft law. But what are they going to do with the unit if it's not covered? They're going to find a way to make it legal. So the issue is not about whether or not it can be a legal residential space. The issue is about covering the unit. And obviously that can be dealt with through the legalization process. And you talk about the incompatible use piece, never made sense from the first enactment, because where you're talking about is the existence of an incompatible use that was in the past, something that was there, right, but may not be there in the future. So what if it was there in the past? Why should that prevent coverage of the unit if the use is going to disappear within a year from now or sooner, right? So you can find a way. There's a path to finding coverage for these units, notwithstanding that these things may exist. So all these problems are already dealt with in the context of the loft law. You don't need them in the law as it currently exists. We can get rid of these exclusions and still deal with those issues in order to find a way to cover these units. So, and the reality is these things were only put in there because of the interests of, the Bloomberg administration and real estate interests. And we can deal with these things. We can find a way to eliminate them so we can find a greater amount of coverage for these buildings. So. So the things that we're asking for here they're not irrational, they're not unreasonable, they're realistic. All right, let's get rid of these things. You guys can do it. Let's find a path to legalization, right? That's what we can do. Give the legalization process a chance, right? Let's get rid of the exclusions. Let's make this happen. You all can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We're going to try to wrap up in about 15 minutes, but there's a few tenants who want to tell a few brief stories. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Paul Wilson, who's been a loft tenant for 20 years and is the son of a loft tenant.
I don't really have a story to tell. I wanted to just echo the thanks that we're giving for our local elected officials who are our neighbors and real public servants. So another hand to Mr. Lenthal, Davila, Levin, and all of them. And I wanted to just say that what people are telling you about the scale of things in Albany, it's weird. You need to be tenacious. You need to show up in their offices and you need to do these things. And I hope that all of you will be able to go at least one day to Albany in the next 3 weeks. It doesn't take that many postcards, phone calls, or visits to sway them. And so what you're hearing about that is absolutely true. If you can get up there, these are the asks, the talking points that Mr. Kozak gave on these make perfect sense. And another talking point, in case they're wondering, I mean, if this is a frivolous bill to benefit a handful of artists down in Brooklyn, and it's not. I mean, art is necessary, all right? It profoundly describes a culture that produces it. It's been under attack. We don't really support the arts, right? The Ford Foundation head called it the beating heart of our humanity. From the cave paintings at Altamira to the hieroglyphics in Egypt, which is not writing, by the way, that's art, and the creation, and Sun Ra spoke everything into existence. The actual things, and those are ideas and modifications of ideas, all the way to now. It's important. We don't support it. We attack it. Artists are creative. They've done what they've had to do to find buildings and factories and things where they could produce art and get inspired and all of the things that it takes. And that's obviously threatened by development, and that's happened in a lot of neighborhoods. So it really, a thing to tell these politicians is that it's necessary, and we don't support it, and we don't do anything for it. The least we can do is have a way for artists to have a space to create. So I hope all of you will go to Albany. We're covered. Pretty long, hard road, and it's not even finished, but if it can be kept open and these sunset clauses done away with, then there always may be a home in the city for artists. Right? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So, very briefly, I'm going to share a little bit of our story. Yes, this is my partner, Shige, and we are at 58 Grand. So Shige moved to Williamsburg 21 years ago. We have been in our space since 1996. And it's our live and work space, like truly our live and work. And we love it that way. We are the kind of, I know there are different kind of creative people. There are individuals who are not artists and uncovered by the Loft Law, and that's great. And in our case, we are artists. And we breathe art every day, every second that we are not sleeping. And our work and our life is very intertwined. We don't want a couch with a big TV. We want a big studio where people can roll and imagine things that we know imagine in the daily life. We like a space where after 8 hours of computer work, somebody can come and take a community class. We just love that way of living. That's why we find a why to be alive, why we have a meaning to exist. So our home is a very special place because it's not only our home, but it's a home of many artists. And I want to say thank you to my dancers who became windows today, and to all the other people that are here. Because like I think Chuck say, you will find yourself doing something you never did before in the next 3-4 weeks. That's true. I don't think if I have placed an audition with come dress like a window to a rally, they will have come to my company. But I really I feel like there is a necessity to keep culture alive, to keep art alive. Not because art is something just super special. Everything is special, but it's just part of an ecosystem. And we need an ecosystem with different kinds of beings coexisting each other. And we need to find a way we link each other. So going to Albany might be a link. Going to the performance of your friend might be a link. Or just writing that press article might be a link. So you have to find your community, but you also have to find a way you link your community with other communities. That's really important.
Hey, Mina.
So, there are a few things you're gonna do. There is gonna be a table there with postcards that you can right now write and send to your representatives. You can make a flyer or you can organize a phone letter writing party in your building. I thought that was fun, but that might say that letters and phone calls are not enough, but you still can do that. You can post the flyers in your building. You can write and call your state senator, your sample person, your city council. You can call the mayor. You can join us to lobbying in Albany, and you can create a tenants association in your building. This is more painful when you have company. So please get together, make tenants association, and join each other's, and let's fight. It's only 4 weeks, so it's gonna go quick. Okay.
Thank you, everybody, so much. We're going to wrap it up now, but please make sure that you fill out the postcard in the back. And also, if you can, donate. That'd be great. Any amount is helpful at this point. And we're going to go up to the Capri Social Club afterwards, which is just a couple blocks from here, and have some drinks. Everybody is welcome. Thank you so much for coming out.
There's actually two things we want to ask you to do. Fill out a postcard and a sign-in card. And there's an info session on June 2nd or June 3rd?
It's a Friday. June 2nd?
June 2nd? Yes. Yeah, for anybody who has issues, specific issues they need to learn about where they are in the Loft Law process, those kind of things are being answered at the info sessions that Kamina has so generously put together for everyone. So you can sign up for those, and you should have gotten emails about them.
Okay, one more thing. Go to the Loft Board meetings. They're all online, and you should show up and go there too.
Please go to the Loft Board meetings. They're very easy to go to. Third Thursday of every month.
Sure. Can somebody be the leader organizing the bus here? Just lift your hand if you can be a leader in organizing. So Paul volunteered right now to organize the bus. So let's make sure you sign the mailing list. Thank you, Paul. And then let's make it happen. Let's get a bus there.